I grew up in China, and in sort of the East Coast area near Shanghai. But when I was 18, I my family moved up to the north, Beijing.
I was born in the Philippines. This is in Southeast Asia. The country is very small. It's the size of 2 Pennsylvanias, but with 7,000 islands.
I actually immigrated from China when I was 8 years old. So what I'm going to be telling you is more or less anecdotal evidence, stories from my mom's experience.
In general, I would say yes. And in first place, there are certain positions, right, that are more geared towards one gender other than the other, right? So not necessarily true that this is the kind of job women cannot do, but it's just a stereotype that we want. And if you look at sort of the political world, right, you barely see any female political leaders. That's one thing. They're aware of doing that, but it's a lot of pressure, so they can not easily get positions like that.
It's very broad. There's a lot of it, and I think in general, really, as a kid, girls has to be more behaved, better behaved than boys, because boys will be boys, but there are no such thing as girls will be girls. And there's some certain degree of being responsible that is expected of you if you're a girl in the house. So you're expected to learn all the household chores a little bit earlier than boys would.
From her generation, there definitely are some expectations. One big one I can name is that women are expected to have children. And so shortly after you get married, you will hear family and friends start to ask about that, and it's pretty uncommon for women to stay single past their mid-30s and to not have kids. I think that's changed a little bit with my generation.
K-12 teachers are usually females. There are a bit more male teachers in the high school than in the earlier grades, but even then they are outnumbered. That seems to be an observation. I was a teacher when I was in the Philippines, so I was a high school teacher. So that's the world that I know. At school, boys tend to dominate over the sciences and the maths, and girls tend to dominate more on the linguistics, language arts, and history and all that.
In Chinese culture, I think predominantly men are still considered the breadwinners, and it's much more socially acceptable for a woman to stay at home. But if she did work, she was also expected to cover most of the things that needed to be done at home. So for my mother, because my dad was in the US before the two of us immigrated, he was here when I was 4 years old. There were 3 years where she had to act as both parents and work a full-time job. And the other thing is that Chinese children are expected to take care of their parents. So she had to take care of my grandparents when they were sick, drive them around, take them to the hospital, provide cooking and all of this too. So the typical saying is, we say, above you you have your parents, below you you have children. But at the same time, then you have to cover a full-time job. So I think the burden is very, very heavy.
If you go to China, you'll be surprised to see that most of, in the cities I'm talking about, most of the young ladies will wear umbrellas on a sunny day, just because people want to keep their, girls want to keep their skin pale, as you mentioned, right? That's if you have darker color, which is different in the US, right? You go to the beach, you get tan, right? But in a lot of Asian countries, you want to look pale, right? Well, partly in China because you want to show that you are, it's more a class thing, hierarchy, right? You want to show that, oh, I'm a higher class, I don't work in the field, right? Because for farmers, they get darker skins, and that's what they do, right? In the sun.
I don't think they were held back in a very noticeable way because of their gender as far as promotion is concerned. They were expected to work hard, but they're also expected to take care of most of the work in the family too, so it's a lot of work to be a working female. And I don't think they were treated differently from men, at least not in the academic workplace. Of course, there could be all these hidden factors, right, that if you were to take a big survey, you might be able to find, but nobody is going to make that explicit.
There are still stereotypes, but it has changed a bit. In terms of work, I don't see it, as I've said, but maybe that's because of the type of jobs that I've had.
Yes, your body type, your body shape really influences what kind of job and how fast you can progress in your work. Yeah. So in China, people think of a thinner woman as more beautiful. So if you're bigger, in general, you're definitely having fewer opportunities in career. One good example is this might sound weird for Americans to hear that. If you want to become a flight attendant, you have to have certain height and specific weight. So otherwise you can never get a job like that. Okay. So if you fly domestically in China or in Asian, just in a lot of Asian countries, you get on the plane, you pretty much see everybody's pretty much the same height, same weight, same body shape. It's the shape, yeah. So a lot of Chinese come into the U.S. and get on airplanes like, whoa, you hire older women, you hire women of different body types, to be flight attendants. So that's definitely it's in Asian countries that's very common.
There are some jobs that do require physical. You have to be this high, or you can't be this big or this heavy. And I think they get away with it. And here you can't ask those questions. But in the Philippines you can. You can put that on your ad. A lot of the ads quoted with the phrase "with pleasing personality." But when you see that on an ad, you know what it means. You have to look good. I worked at the fast food chain when I was in college, and there are 3 types of jobs. You should either be in the kitchen, working in the kitchen, or you would be working on the floor, wiping the tables and stuff like that. Or you could be on the counter where people order food, and they pick the people with pleasing personality to be at the counter, and that's that. Just because of how you look, you're gonna be at the counter, and your personality. If you're bubbly or what, then you be there. And then, if you don't look as nice, then you go to the kitchen, and that's your job.
I think attire is a big deal in the Chinese culture. So, as far as the workplace is concerned, I don't think it's too different than for males, although women are expected to dress maybe on the far edge of being formal, whereas men can probably err a little bit on the side of informal. So dress is a big deal for women, probably more than it is for men, although I don't know how much that has changed in the past 10 years, let's say. Well, my mom was a college teacher, so she was an instructor first and then a professor. And typically when I talked to her, she wasn't required to wear heels, but she was definitely expected to go business casual at the least, up to business formal. So some nice flats, a top like what I'm wearing now, a blazer, or a skirt or pants. I think pants were more common.
Asians, at least Filipinos, tend to be skinny anyway, and it's a big issue if you're not. And every time I go home, my friends or cousins would say how big I've grown, and then I come back here and I'm so tiny. I don't know if that happens to men. I don't think it does, not as much at least. It seems like a bigger deal with women.
But one thing I did talk with my mother about is the fact that there was very little sexual harassment training. So if you're a woman and you're sexually harassed in the workplace, there were at that time very few official channels that you could go through to resolve things like that. There were unofficial channels, but for the most part it was very difficult to lodge any kind of official complaint. So that's one thing that's very different from the workplace here.
Socially, for example, it is okay for men to have multiple partners, not at the same time, but to have had multiple relationships before they get married. But for women, it's not as desirable, I guess. We are in a country where, unlike here, people date and they date and they date, and then when you find that you like each other and you want to spend more time together, then you start becoming together, maybe living together before you get married. In the Philippines, it's old-fashioned. There's courtship, right? So the boy would ask permission from the girl and her parents to pay court, and then he would do that. He would do the courting and to visit and stuff, and then he would do the wooing, right? And then to be wooed by a lot of men is okay, but you really should only agree to go out with one of them. Whereas boys can, after wooing this woman, if it doesn't look like it's going anywhere, they could just go and, they could have multiple partners before they get married. And that doesn't seem to be a good strategy for women overall.
On the other hand, I have to say that if you look at the whole history of China, I would say with the globalization of all the dialogues and everything, and definitely I see changes compared to back then arranged marriages and women did not have any right, and then 1949 the People's Republic of China was founded, and then there are new policies. There's a saying that woman holds half of the sky. So basically, you do have opportunity. You're supposed to give in the. Hopefully, that someday will become real, truly the case, right? But I think that people in China start to realize that this is not correct, right? So there are a lot of women's groups and campaigns, a lot of things going on. So hopefully one day we'll see big changes, and it will hopefully not only for China, all over the world, right? Mm-hmm. Women will have definitely a different level of opportunities and all that.